And so if all of you would turn to hymn number 10, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, in the blue hymnals. And I just wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about this hymn. The writer, Robert Robinson, actually lived kind of a hard life, kind of lived in a life of sin and poverty, and he was converted at the age of 17, and then actually became a Baptist minister. But throughout his life, he continued still to fall back on those things that he had grown up with. And he really fought and struggled with those sins and addictions and those types of things his whole life. And in the midst of that, he wrote this hymn because he did struggle so much. And he was a writer, and so this was first written just as a poem, and somebody picked it up unbeknownst to him and wrote the music. And years later, as he was on a carriage ride, there was a woman sitting there singing the words that he had written, and he never knew had become a hymn. And it was at a point in his life where he needed those words himself, and so he asked her, "Where did that come from?" I'm the one that wrote that. And I think all of us sometimes have struggles that we deal with, and we know that we can always return to the Lord, and He will renew us and give us strength. So I just like to sing all three verses, everybody on all of them, for this first hymn, number 10. Our next hymn will be hymn number 50, I Need Thee Every Hour. And I can kind of relate to this one because this was actually written by a mother and a housewife. And probably some of you men can relate just with the busyness of your work schedules and how the world is today. We all feel like we're overwhelmed with lots of things. And the woman who wrote this, it was just at a time where she was just feeling utterly overwhelmed, and she said the Spirit came over her and just overwhelmed her and gave her these words and this time of comfort. And it wasn't actually until several years later when she experienced some really hard things that she knew why she was given the exact words to this song. So whatever you're feeling today or have brought with you, know that the Lord can take those things from you. And so I would like if all of us sing the first verse, and then I'm going to have the right, everybody on the right sing the second verse, everybody on the left sing the third, and then everybody together on the fourth verse again. Okay? Hymn number 371, Trust and Obey. And I think it fitting that we just came off a prayer and testimony service, because this hymn actually was inspired by a young man who stood up in a testimony service and basically said to the congregation, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what the Lord requires of me, but I'm just going to trust and obey that He knows best. And there was a man in the church that just thought that was very fitting and couldn't get those words out of his mind. And so he went home and he wrote this hymn about trust and obey. And so there are 5 verses. It's a little long, but I'd like the first verse to be sung by the children, just the youth. And then we're going to add in the women on the second verse. So the second verse will be children and women. And then the third verse, we're going to add in the men. And then we'll sing the fourth and the fifth verse together. So it's going to kind of start out with just a few, and we're going to slowly add on to that. Children, the first verse, and then everyone after. 371, Trust and Obey.
choir gets up